Welcome to prophecy number 2, Daniel's beasts and the little horn. This is the second part. Before viewing this material, it will be helpful to view part 1, Our Day in Prophecy, as it lays the foundation for the material here. These prophecies build on each other, so it is necessary to have a good foundation. Just as basic math is needed to do algebra, it will be helpful to view part 1 before continuing with this session. In Daniel chapter 2, we saw that King Nebuchadnezzar had a special dream. That dream was a prophecy, and Daniel, by God's grace, helped him out. Now in Babylon, about 50 years later, a new king, Belshazzar, was in power. But this time it was Daniel who had a special dream. This dream was also a prophecy that God gave him. Daniel chapter 7. The Bible begins in verse 1. In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream and visions of his head while on his bed. Then he wrote down the dream, telling the main facts. Daniel spoke, saying, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, 4 winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea. And 4 great beasts came up from the sea, each different from the other. 4 beasts, sea. Similar to the way Jesus spoke in parables, prophecy is given in symbols. The image in Daniel 2 had 4 metals: gold, silver, brass, and iron. And here, in Daniel 7, we have 4 beasts. So in Bible prophecy, what does a beast represent? Remember, we should let the Bible interpret itself. This is the way for accurate Bible interpretation. To get the interpretation that God intends, let the Bible interpret itself. For a beast, if we look at verses 17 and 23, those great beasts which are 4 are 4 kings which arise out of the earth. In verse 23, the 4th beast shall be a 4th kingdom on earth. Here, the Bible is unmistakably clear as to what a beast is. A beast represents a kingdom, a king, and thus his kingdom. So we have 4 and beasts. Now how about sea? The books of Daniel and Revelation are companion books. They deal with much prophecy, and the Bible is designed that both Daniel and Revelation need to be studied together. So what does water or sea represent in Bible prophecy? Revelation 17:15 has the answer. The waters which you saw where the harlot sits are peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues. Water or sea represents populated area. Water or sea represents many, many people. And we could also look at Isaiah 17, verses 12 and 13 to confirm. Letting the Bible interpret itself, we have seen that a beast represents a kingdom, and water or sea represents lots of people, a heavily populated area. So, back to Daniel, chapter 7, verse 3. 4 great beasts came up from the sea, each different from the other. At the beginning of this prophecy, Daniel sees 4 great beasts coming out of the sea, 4 great kingdoms coming up out of a heavily populated area. Now we can continue in verse 4, where Daniel describes the beasts. The first was like a lion, and had eagle's wings. I watched till that its wings were plucked off, and it was lifted up from the earth, and made to stand on 2 feet like a man, and a man's heart was given to it. Verse 5, and suddenly another beast, a second, like a bear. It was raised up on one side, and it had 3 ribs in its mouth, between its teeth. And they said thus to it, Arise, devour much flesh. And this I looked, and there was another, like a leopard, which had on its back 4 wings of a bird. This beast also had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. And after this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrible, exceedingly strong. It had huge iron teeth. It was devouring, breaking in pieces, and trampling the residue with its feet. It was different from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. These are the 4 beasts of Daniel 7, a lion, a bear, a leopard, and a terrible beast. Daniel 2 had 4 metals representing 4 kingdoms. Daniel 7 has 4 beasts representing 4 kingdoms. Daniel 7 is a parallel prophecy of Daniel 2. The same kingdoms are being represented here in Daniel 7. In Daniel 2, they were represented by metals, and now the kingdoms are represented by beasts. This is an important technique that the Bible uses. It is called repeat and enlarge. A prophecy in the Bible is repeated in a new way, in a new light, and adding additional information. This is confirmed as the first beast of Daniel 7, the lion, representing Babylon. In Daniel 2, the Bible clearly identified the head of gold as Babylon. In Daniel 7, it is a lion. The Bible had previously used the lion to refer to Babylon, such as Jeremiah chapter 50, verses 43 and 44, chapter 4, verse 7, and chapter 50, verse 17. Interestingly enough, the lion has showed up on much of the architecture of Babylon, in particular the famed Ishtar Gate. Notice the lion here in various aspects. Babylon was the lion. The second beast, Daniel, chapter 7, verse 5. And suddenly another beast, a second, like a bear. It was raised up on one side, and had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth. And they said thus to it, Arise, devour much flesh. The bear represents the power that followed Babylon, the Medo-Persian Empire. Just as the image of silver had 2 arms, one for the Medes and one for the Persians, this bear was raised up on one side, just as the Persians were stronger than the Medes. Arise and devour much flesh. It had 3 ribs in its mouth. The 3 nations Medo-Persia conquered to come to power: Babylon, Lydia, and Egypt. And confirming this prophecy, this kingdom, Medo-Persia, along with the next kingdom, are called out by name in the next chapter, Daniel 8.